Well, hello and good afternoon, everyone. I hope everyone had a great break and welcome to the North Carolina Next Generation 911 Overview and Update presentation. My name is Matthew McLam. I am with the Center for Geographic Information and Analysis, CGIA, for the state of North Carolina. I'm the Assistant Director and working on the GIS portion of the NextGen 911 project.
Hi, my name is Jessica Byerman. I'm a GIS project manager on the GeoComm side for the project. Thanks for joining us today.
Yes, today we're going to go over an update of where we are on the NextGen 911 project. Jessica's also going to give us some information about how GIS data is used in the call routing process. So if you haven't seen that or you're not really sure what your data is being used for, this will be a great chance for her to, or for you to see that through her explanation. I do want to encourage you, if you have questions, open up that chat window on the right side of the screen, that little green chat icon, join the chat, ask your questions. We'll be reviewing that chat list at the end of the presentation. We'll make sure we have some time to answer your questions. We'll also have contact information available at the end of this presentation. So if you want to reach out at a later date and reach out to us directly, have that option as well. So the NextGen project continues to progress across the state. The migration to ESInet is ongoing with AT&T, as you heard Pokey mention this morning in the opening plenary. GeoComm has been contracted to help with the GIS services portion, and we have partnered with them to coordinate with the outreach and education and GIS support that's needed to support the 115 primary PSAPs across North Carolina. There are some additional resources and training videos made available online. You can see those two links there. That first link gives you information about the NextGen project in general. The second link gives you information about the NextGen project from the GIS perspective, and some great resources are made available at those links. You probably are familiar now with GeoComm's Gis Data Hub. If you're not, and you're responsible for GIS data within your municipality, and you haven't quite made the step to prepare your data for i3 and NextGen, you will become familiar with it. This application is where everyone is loading their data into and will continue to load their data for use in the NextGen project, and where you perform your field mapping, and this data ultimately becomes aggregated into the statewide data set. Quality control checks are performed with the data that's uploaded to Gis Data Hub. We'll look at an example of that here later in the presentation. And that PDF report also contains information and a link to the GIS data, which highlights the errors that you have in your data. So a lot of great information coming out of Gis Data Hub. Gis Data Hub will continue to be used in the immediate future for uploading your GIS data and crosswalking your fields. As I mentioned, we've worked closely with GeoComm and the 911 board and the regional coordinators on the outreach for NextGen 911. Quick recap, a couple of years ago almost now, I can't believe it, but it's almost been 2 years, we conducted the 4 regional workshops across the state. Since then, numerous mini regional workshops were conducted, and those were provided for one-on-one attention with the PSAPs in groups of 3 or 4 PSAPs, or some even did have a one-on-one environment, working through how to upload your data, what do those reports mean, and how to process your data. In March of last year, obviously we shifted to virtual meetings and continued to meet with each of you through a virtual environment. And we appreciate all the hard work you've continued to put in, and we'll look at a status map in a few minutes to actually see the progress that's been made across the state. If you have a request for a meeting, you'd like to meet and discuss something in more detail, feel free to reach out to me. I'll work with you to get that scheduled, whether it's with me or with someone on the GeoComm side.
So first, we're going to go over the required GIS data layers. There's a number of them, and I'm going to discuss how they're used. So the provisioning boundary is really used more with your local data set as you upload, so that we can compare and check that there are no polygons, no roads, no points that fall outside of that boundary that could cause overlaps with other submitting jurisdictions that are around you. The road center lines and address points are used to determine where a landline telephone record would fall based on their address. So it's like a geocode of that. So the address points are used first during a 911 call. And if an address isn't found, it falls back on the road center line, which is the reason that we ask for the ALI database, that telephone record database, to be uploaded regularly to figure out what the synchronization rate is. So what we can expect for landline calls that call 911 or locations that call 911, how many of them will find a location in the map. It's important that close to 100% or 100% find them, but realizing that's not always completely possible. 98% is the benchmark right now. So then as a location, a road or point is found with that ALI database address record, the PSAP boundary that it falls into is what's then used to route the call to the correct PSAP. The other emergency service boundaries, the fire law and EMS, they're used to transfer information about the fire department, the law department, the medical responder for that specific location that the point falls into. So at this point, the most important field in those layers is that display name field, as that's what pops up on the CPE in a PSAP. This shows you a high-level overview of what happens when you upload your data to Gis Data Hub. So we have all the individual disparate data sets that you maintain locally through Rgis Desktop or Pro. You zip up that file, including your ALI database, and it goes into Gis Data Hub and goes through a number of predefined quality control checks that we've, they're very detailed. They're, the critical checks are the ones that are highlighted that need to be corrected for your data to be used for call routing for NG. But then we also have a number of other informational and warning errors that are just general good practice to clean up, but are not critical necessarily for that NextGen 911 call routing process. So after it goes through these quality control checks, it goes through into a aggregated statewide GIS data set and becomes one whole state data set that's intended to be seamless so that that can be used for call routing. Goes through another set of quality control checks after it's aggregated so that we can let you know if there are any gaps or overlaps with neighboring jurisdictions that need to be worked on. And that data set's also made available, that aggregated data set, to you at any point. And then the data is provisioned out to the North Carolina ESInet, the EGDMS is what we refer it to first. And from the EGDMS, it actually goes through a number of other QC checks and then into the emergency call routing function where it's actually used for routing. So the ESInet is the Emergency Services IP network. And in the very end state, when everything is completely over to I3 and NextGen 911, your GIS data is used in various areas for validation of records and call routing. At this point, when you're I3 ready, it's actually just used for call routing. So this diagram will show you what the end state would be in the future. So you have subscribers. So that's basically landline customers that request a new landline through a communication service provider. Well, the communication service provider will then put that service order into something called a location information server, or LIS. And that then in turn goes and asks the location validation function that houses the GIS data that you've submitted and that's been aggregated, and finds out if that address that was provided by the subscriber is actually a valid address according to the GIS data. And once it is, it can get stored in the list for future calls that come in. So this is all happening before there's any kind of call for service. They said this is actually future state right now. A master street address guide that's a tabular form that's still utilized for this step. And then when an actual call for service happens, it goes through something called a border control function. And this is very simplified too, but that's just to make sure it's truly a 911 call and not some malicious call that's trying to get into the ESInet. And from there, it gets sent to an emergency services routing proxy that determines where a call needs to be sent. But it needs to check again with the GIS data, and it goes to something called the ECRF, or emergency call routing function. And that is actually currently on R3. That's what's used right now to route your calls to the correct PSAP. So the question goes in, where should I route this call? The ECRF will say, based on where it was interpolated on the road or the address point, which PSAP that falls in, it sends back that URI value that you have in your GIS data to determine which PSAP it should go to and get sent to the correct one. And Technically, if your same data goes into your PSAP mapping or CAD system, then it also should find that for the call taker. So the GIS system, the aggregated data goes to something called a spatial interface, which is provisioned. And from there, it's provisioned to all those different, green boxes, the LDF, the ESInet, and possibly, you can also get that same data and get that into your PSAP mapping. So our GIS data requirements, we talked about the layers at the beginning. They do follow the next generation 9.1 standard. And anyone that goes live on the ESInet or ESInet, both terms are used. At this point, you transition, your data has to be at that I3 readiness. And what we consider ready is when all the required layers, the address points, the road center lines, fire law, EMS layers, the PSAP and the provisioning boundary are uploaded into GIS Data Hub. And there are no critical errors remaining. That means no road range overlaps, no polygon gaps within your data, no polygons that are overlaps or go outside of your provisioning boundary, no roads that go outside of your provisioning boundary, and the alley database to road centerline match rate has to be at the 98%. And on the right side, you'll see it's a screenshot of the data quality report. And I wanted to get into the quality control checks as well. Just get you more details on those. I know, if you uploaded your data regularly to GIS Data Hub, you see what's highlighted in red on the PDF report, and also you have the CSV file and a file geodatabase with individual results for each error type that get reported back to you. The user guide will have all the full list of errors, the names of those errors, and then which ones are considered critical. And if they're not critical errors, there's an option to use exception codes. So that information is also in the user guide. There's also a help file directly in GIS Data Hub. It's a little question mark up on the top, and that will open a separate window, and you can search for the errors that you have in your data and get examples of how, suggestions on how to correct those. Another one to really look into is, we aggregate all the data and then run more QC checks. At that point, we can identify if there's any boundary overlaps or gaps with neighbors or road range overlaps. And we'll have a few examples on the next slides showing where we've had road range overlaps and that they need to be reviewed. Because again, if a call comes in on an address that falls on that road, it can't determine which road is the correct road, and therefore can't determine which PSAP a call should be routed to. Same thing would happen with duplicate address points. So here's just an example. You'll see that the address points have the same name. They do have different additional location information, but that right now isn't used when a call actually is sent. That gold and silver repair in this situation wouldn't be in the alley database to be sent along to differentiate between these two address points. So while we know that you want to have that detail in your data locally, what we recommend doing is if you have situations where a unit or a building isn't actually differentiating the address from another one, to add the GC exception code of 999. So then you have your data, you have it available locally, but it's not actually processed. The one with the 999 in it isn't processed and doesn't get moved into the aggregated data set. So that's our suggestion on there. And also, so you know that what's used is the address number, the pre-directional, pre-type, pre-separator, street name, post type, and post-directional, and post modifier. So all 8 of those fully spelled out fields, plus the MSAG community is used to determine if something's unique or not. This slide shows some examples of where we found range overlaps between two different jurisdictions. So the green boundaries are the jurisdictional boundaries, and there are range overlaps between the two. And it's probably because same MSAG community is used because they're fairly close to each other. These do need to be resolved. We recommend you coordinate with your neighbor on doing this and figuring out if you truly have the same house number and street name in both jurisdictions, or if they're just similar and the ranges could be adjusted in such a way that your ranges on your side cover all your structures and your neighboring jurisdictions ranges cover all their structures that fall into their location. So it's important to get those resolved because, like I mentioned a couple of slides ago, if a call came in from these range overlapped roads, it wouldn't know which PSAP the call should be sent to. And here's an example of gaps and overlaps that are found in the data. And there is a tolerance of 3,600 square meters right now because we realize that as transformation happens, so most of you maintain your data in at 83 state plane, well, it gets transformed to WGS 84, that geographic coordinate system, and that's part of the NENA standard to come up with a coordinate system that can work nationwide, and eventually also worldwide. And once that transformation happens, slight shifts happen in data, and that's why we have the tolerance. But as you can see in these examples, these are larger shifts. 400 meters is one of the biggest distances here. What we'd recommend is then work with your neighbor to actually get their data in their local projection, swap that out so you can agree and align your data in your local projection. And this topology toolbar in ArcGIS Desktop has an align edge tool that works pretty smoothly. You can just align all your boundaries at the same time, so you're provisioning PSAP, fire, lawn, EMS. Okay, I'm going to hand it back over to Matt.
Thanks, Jessica. Appreciate it. So on the website, if you've been in any of our update presentations in the past, you've seen this dashboard. And this dashboard is available. That link's at the bottom. I know it's a rather long link, so maybe screenshot it. Or if you go to that NextGen GIS page, it is available there. You can get to this dashboard. We update this dashboard usually every week towards the end of the week, identifying the status of each of the counties or PSAPs across the state in regards to their preparation for I3 readiness. As you can see, this screenshot was taken in September of 2020 when I presented at the NCAUG conference and provided an update. You can see the different shades starting from the bottom going up. Those orange colors are users that have either been created in Gis Data Hub or they've uploaded data, but they haven't uploaded their alley. That middle color there, the 39, that light shade of green, those are users that have uploaded their data, including their alley, and are actively working on preparing their data. And then those top two categories are users who have uploaded data and their data is considered I3 ready. So it meets that 98% match rate between the alley and the center lines and no critical errors. In September, as you can see, we had a total of 41 PSAPs across the state of the 115 primary PSAPs that were considered I3 ready. And if we go ahead and switch over to the next screen, we'll actually see that there's quite a bit more green that's been filled in on the map, and that's great. So as of the current dashboard that was updated this past Friday or Thursday, we can actually see there's 71 PSAPs, so an increase of 30 PSAPs in 5 months. That have reached that I3 readiness status, and that's great. And we appreciate all the work that everyone's been putting in. I know that there's actually a couple of PSAPs that have reached I3 readiness since this was updated last week. So when we do that update later this week, I know we're going to have some more in those darker shades of green. So really appreciate all the work that everyone's put into it. The success of the project wouldn't be where it is without everyone working so hard and diligently to prepare your GIS data. So some of the ongoing efforts are border alignment, and that includes not only internally borders, but also borders with our neighboring states. I won't read through the status of all these, but we continue to work closely with our neighboring 911 and GIS contacts in Virginia, Tennessee, South Carolina, and Georgia to ensure that the borders align and that the data they're putting into their NextGen and ESInet environments match what we have and vice versa. Some agencies, the border's been fine. Others, there's been some give and take based on where it makes sense for those calls to be routed based on the jurisdictions. So we really appreciate all the efforts that have been put in on both sides. And if you are neighboring these states and you do have questions about who you should be working with, if you haven't done that yet, please reach out to me. I'll make sure that we put you in contact with the right people and even facilitate a meeting with all of us to sit down and talk about it and get those borders lined up. Some key items to consider, as I mentioned, continue working with your neighbors and working out these borders. It's not just the provisioning and PSAP boundaries, it's those fire law and EMS boundaries, also the roads and the address points, making sure they line up. And then once those aggregated results come back and it shows that there are range overlaps, making sure that that's resolved as well. GIS due dates. If you've already gone live or you've already had to meet a deadline, I'm sure you've heard from us reaching out, making sure that you're aware of your due date and when it's coming. We set those approximately 70 days ahead of your ESInet go live date at the PSAP to make sure that all the GIS data is ready and that it can be processed and go through all the steps that Jessica mentioned earlier. Unless you're going live sooner, we are asking that all PSAPs have their data I3 ready by May 3rd of this year. So that's the target date for everyone. We're a few months out from that now. We really are targeting to have all the GIS data ready so that as these projects continue to be initiated and move forward, that the GIS data is ready there. And even if your due date is May 3rd, or you're not sure when you're going live, we do ask you to go ahead and upload often. It doesn't hurt anything. It just helps you see where your data stands and what you need to work on and work towards. So let's say that you're I3 ready, your data is good to go, it's been signed off. Maybe you're live, or maybe you're waiting to go live. You're wondering what's next. We appreciate that work, but we still need updated and current GIS data moving forward. That data is, as you saw through the diagrams that Jessica showed, it is important and imperative that we have latest and greatest data so that call routing can work effectively and efficiently. So we do ask that you upload your data monthly to Gis Data Hub, review those error reports. If you have errors that come back, we are asking that you resolve those errors within 24 hours to ensure that data can be processed and used. We can't push it into the statewide data set with critical errors, so we do ask that you continue to work through that process. And if you have any questions about that and what it looks like, this document that you see on the screen, I don't expect you to be able to read that, but that document is available with key information, so it's a good reminder and a refresher to look at. It contains important links and contact info. That document is available on the NextGen GIS site. And with that said, the NextGen GIS site is linked at the top of this slide. You can find the dashboard, the documents that we've discussed, contact information, which is also available on this slide, is available there as well. Feel free to reach out. We're here to answer questions and help any way we can. This is a team effort, and we'd love to work with you any way that we can and make sure you're clear on what's required and what's being asked, and you also understand how it's being used. Statewide data sets that come out of this are also critical. Data will ultimately feed into the Address NC initiative. NC DOT will be utilizing the roads data to go through and be involved in their processes. If you're not aware, you can also download the statewide data set and get rail, road lines, and crossings in the statewide data set. That information is provided to us and put into the system monthly from the NC DOT Rail Division. And is made back available to you through the statewide data set. So if you're not sure how to get to that or how to download it, please let me know and I'll make sure I point you to the right link or to the link to download that information. So again, I thank everybody for attending. I'm going to switch over and look at the chat to see. I've seen some questions come in, and if you have questions, feel free to go ahead and put them in there, and we'll get through as many as we can. Tim asked if there have been any issues with jurisdictions that have moved to the ArcGIS Pro platform. No issues that I'm aware of. The process of exporting your data and uploading to Gis Data Hub remains the same, no matter if you're using that or ArcMap. Kind of a similar question was a question about GeoComm Resolver. Is it ArcGIS Pro friendly? And Jessica, I'll let you address that question.
It is not yet at this time, but we are working on a solution for it. We'll let you know when that's available.
Okay. So yes, it is available in ArcMap. If you're not sure what that is or how to get set up on that, let me know and we can work with you on that process. Kat asked, is there a master list of people who are working in Gis Data Hub and submitting data? so they can easily communicate with the people who are performing the data updates. So we don't have a published list of that. We do have a list internally of who those people are, Kat. So we can definitely make you aware of your neighbors that are uploading into GIS Data Hub, who those people are, and put you in contact with each other to make sure that you're able to work on your borders and your adjoining data. So I'd be happy to do that. I'll make a note, Kat, to provide that information to you. And again, if there's others that want that information, we can work with you to provide that as well. Ray and Kat seconded the question, is asking what the difference is between i3 Ready in EGDMS and GIS Data Hub there in the dashboard. So when you upload your GIS data to GIS Data Hub, that's when you get those PDF reports back to show your errors, and eventually you reach that i3 readiness status by through GIS Data Hub. From there, your data is then pushed to EGDMS, and they have their own QC checks that they run. Those are very much in line with what you receive back from GIS Data Hub, so there shouldn't be any surprises there. Everything should check out. But there are two different stages. Some people sit in the GIS Data Hub side of things for a bit longer because they're not going live, so there's no need to push their data into EGDMS until they're closer to their go live date. Usually once you get fairly close to your go live date, GeoComm will push your data to EGDMS, and that's when you move up in that dashboard category. Jessica, is there anything you want to add to that answer?
The only thing I wanted to mention is just taking a look at the QC results after the data is aggregated, and we try to distribute that regularly. Probably end up getting more emails on that. So as soon as you do reach that GDH i3 readiness, your data will go through a separate QC process that checks all critical errors, but in that aggregated data set. So that's where we would identify possible range overlaps between jurisdictions, or polygon overlaps, or duplicate address points that are really not in your own data necessarily, but across with your neighbors. So it's important too to take a look at those when you get an email with that information to see if anything needs to be resolved.
Right. Derek asked, are regions of North Carolina going live on ESInet, or is the whole state going live at the same time? Virginia took a phased approach with theirs, Northern VA, Richmond, Hampton Roads, etc. So Derek, there's not really a regional approach to this. It's based on the PSAP and where they are in the project line with AT&T on when they go live. So if you look at that dashboard that's linked, you can kind of see where people are. If you click on a point on that dashboard, you actually get their go live date and when their GIS data is due. So there's not really a region per se. It's just PSAPs going live based on their project timeline with AT&T. Kat asked a more in the weeds question. How do you deal with ranges, portions of ranges of streets that are in a different jurisdiction? Seems like zeroing out the portions that are in my county would lead to issues with our CAD system. So Kat, if you can zero out your side if they're not actually in your jurisdiction. One option is if they're going outside of your boundary, you can actually clip it at the boundary and put an exception code on those segments so they don't even get processed at all in GIS Data Hub. But you still keep them in your data set for reference and use in the CAD system. It just depends if you are truly the owner of those and you need that information in yours, and it's in the other jurisdiction as well. Usually the community name, the MSAC community name, will take care of any overlap, but there may be instances where there's overlap that exists, and that's, we've kind of handled that on a case-by-case basis. But Jessica, is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I thought it was something that I don't think we've really run into and talked about much this project, but if you have a road that actually runs right along the border and you would need to zero out the ones that are on the side that's not in your jurisdiction, there is another exception code that you can use that will zero out either right or left ranges upon upload. So that way you could keep the ranges in your local data. If you take a look at the user guide, I don't think we've talked about this too much, but because the questions haven't come up on it, but that would be a solution.
Okay. I see a couple more questions. We're going to take those. I do want to make everyone aware, though, that we're at the 12:30 mark. So if you would like to attend another session, you can jump over and do that. Actually, I think we're going up against a break. So I'm sorry. We have a break. So if you want to take your break, feel free to do that. The chat did just close because we did reach that 12:30 mark. So I didn't get a chance to grab all the questions, but we are up against a break. I know some of you did have additional questions that were coming in. Please do reach out to us directly. If you email myself and then that NC team at GeoComm email, Jessica will get that as well as the other members at GeoComm. We'd be happy to address those questions and help you out further. Especially some of these scenarios are fairly specific, and they are unique to certain agencies, and we've come across many of those. So we'd be happy to help you out and work with you directly. Thank you so much, everybody, for your time. Again, thank you for the effort that you've put in. Great progress has been made in just under 2 years since we kicked this off in those regional meetings. So we appreciate the effort. We look forward to continue working with you all. Have a great break. There are a couple of vendor demo theaters that will be going on during the break. Otherwise, we'll resume at 1:30 with the rest of the live breakout sessions. And I hope everybody has a great afternoon. Thank you, Jessica, for your time this afternoon and also for your efforts on the project.
Thank you, everyone, for joining.